With over 25 playable maps in fighting, there's a wide variety of layouts and mechanics that make each one feel distinct. However, not every map benefits each fighter equally. Some maps offer advantages that complement a fighter's playstyle, while others contain features that can work against them. That's why today, I'll be examining every fighter and determining their worst performing maps. Before we begin, I want to clarify a couple of things. First, while I consider myself a decent fighting player, I'm by no means at a competitive level. Because of that, some of my map choices might seem unusual or often more experienced players. If you're a high level or competitive player and have any thoughts or insights, feel free to leave a comment. I really appreciate the different perspective. Second, each fighter's worst map will be tied to the specific game mode it's played on. For hybrid maps, those that support both Annihilate and Conquer, I'll make sure to clarify which mode I'm talking about. Originally, I wanted to give each fighter 2 worst maps, one for Annihilate and one for Conquer, but as I was writing the script, it started feeling repetitive for certain entries, and honestly, I'd rather dive deeper into one map than stretch myself thin trying to cover 2. Also, I won't be choosing a worse escort map for each fighter, as not only are there only 2 escort maps currently in the game, but I personally feel like I haven't played them enough to make any fair judgments. And third, maps aren't the make or break in a fighter's viability. Elements like team composition, skill, and communication honestly play a much larger role. The goal of this video is to offer a broader, more general perspective on which map designs certain fighters often struggle with, rather than labeling certain maps as bad. So take everything with a grain of salt. With that all said, let's get right into it. Starting off with Sword, Sword's worst map is Annihilate on Space Knights. Sword struggles on large open maps due to his limited horizontal mobility and lack of ranged abilities. On a map like Space Knights, where there's minimal cover and plenty of open space, closing the gap on enemies, especially ranged fighters, becomes extremely difficult. If Sword tries to approach them carelessly, he can easily be punished before he can get in range. Since Space Knights is a hybrid map, I had to determine which game mode was worse for Sword. Ultimately, I ended up choosing Annihilate. Annihilate gives teams more flexibility in positioning, allowing them to spread out more, which works against a melee fighter like Sword. In contrast, Conquer forces players to engage in a single contested zone, creating more frequent close-range fights. Additionally, Sword's finisher can be used more effectively in Conquer to secure control of the point, an advantage that's much harder to replicate in Annihilate. Skateboard's worst map is Roblox Headquarters. When taking a look at the full roster of maps, most of them, even those smaller in size, offer ample trick opportunities and open space for Skateboard. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Roblox HQ. Its single hallway is both narrow and confined, leaving little room for Skateboard to stay on his board consistently without risking collisions or being forced off his board, leaving him without an escape option. This tight space also demands much more precise control, making Skateboard harder to handle. While there are more open platforms above and below the hallway, these are situational and depend on the opponents positioning themselves there. As a result, he often struggles to generate consistent value on this map without exposing himself to heavy punishes. Biograft's worst map is Roblox Bank. Biograft is a squishy fighter who excels at eliminating lone backliners. However, Roblox Bank makes it much more challenging. Its confined spaces and small size keeps teams close together, making it harder for Biograft to find lone targets. Even in a successful attempt to eliminate a backliner, they risk being quickly overwhelmed by nearby enemies, all thanks to Roblox Bank's size. The map's tight layout also limits Biograft's options for a safe retreat and recovery. Katana's worst map is Domino Valley. Katana struggles most on Domino Valley due to this map's wide layout, which works against his close-range AoE focused playstyle. The abundance of open space makes it difficult to close a gap on opponents safely. Additionally, the map's varied elevation levels only worsen the issue. Since Katana lacks vertical mobility, it's much harder for him to keep up with fighters who can reposition more freely. Annihilate on Space Knights was another option I considered, but I ultimately decided against it. It features certain areas, like the bridge choke points, where Katana can still perform well. Banhammer's worst map is Doomspire. Doomspire is wide, spacious, and lacks objects of cover. As a slow, heavy tank, Banhammer struggles to consistently contest ranged opponents without support in these open settings. Even with Q, his only form of mobility, Doomspire's size grants more mobile fighters plenty of room to escape his attacks. Rocket's worst map is Roblox Museum. Rocket was a tough fighter to choose a worst map for. His range attacks and area damage make him viable on both large and small maps. In the end, I settled with Roblox Museum as his weakest map due to its expansive layout and large number of obstacles scattered throughout the map, interfering with Rocket's projectiles and reducing the consistency of his damage output. Additionally, the map's multiple hallways and entrances allow enemy teams to split up and flank from different angles, weakening the impact of Rocket's area attacks. On top of that, Rocket's finisher is less effective here, as the map's two-floor structure limits his ability to catch multiple enemies upon using it. Slingshot's worst map is Iron Cafe. Iron Cafe is incredibly small, already making it more difficult for Slingshot to abuse his status as a ranged fighter, but it also makes him an easier target for melee fighters that normally would struggle to approach him. And with it being Conquer, this means everyone will mostly be clumped up together, overwhelming Slingshot's general single target focus and thereby decreasing his ability to pick up low fighters substantially. Hyperlaser's worst map is Shooting Teapot Observatory. Choosing a worst map for Hyperlaser was surprisingly difficult at first. Maps like Underground War, Iron Cafe, and Rocket Arena all seemed like strong contenders. However, none came as close to Shooting Teapot Observatory. Shooting Teapot Observatory already offers very few long-range vantage points for Hyperlaser to safely position himself, but this is made worse thanks to its unique mechanic, a conquer point that shifts locations over time. As a result, Hyperlaser is constantly forced to reposition, exposing him to many fighters who normally would struggle to get close. Seriously, all three conquer points are pretty bad, as they either force Hyperlaser into close-range encounters or have obstacles that obstruct his line of fire. Shuriken's worst map is Dunespire. Shuriken thrives on flanking and attacking opponents from unexpected angles, so he often performs best on maps with plenty of cover, alternate routes, and tight spaces to slip through. Dunespire, however, lacks nearly all of these features. The map's central area is wide open, and with most of the action happening here, it's difficult for Shuriken to sneak up on opponents undetected. The lack of vertical walls and structures also limits the utility of both his passive and Q, reducing his options for engagements and escapes. Scythe's worst map is, okay, so hear me out. I honestly really don't think Scythe has a worst map, or at least, I couldn't make a concrete decision. Her versatile hybrid playstyle allows her to adapt well across a wide variety of maps, from small to large, open to crowded. So yeah, at the moment, I believe that Scythe does not have a worst map, but I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind in the future. Medkit's worst map is Roblox Museum. Okay, at first I thought Medkit was in a similar boat with Scythe, but after some thinking, I chose Roblox Museum. Medkit generally struggles on more confined maps with lots of tight corridors and obstacles, disrupting his ability to heal effectively using both his primary and Q. Roblox Museum exemplifies these challenges. Its narrow hallways and enclosed rooms limit the range and visibility Medkit needs to provide consistent healing. The map's two-floor layout further complicates his positioning, making it harder to maintain line of sight with teammates, especially when using his Q, which requires direct visibility. These factors also hinder his ability to escape when needed. Boombox's worst map is Annihilate on Space Knights. His kit is centered around melee area attacks, with limited tools for dealing ranged damage. This puts him in a similar situation to Sword, making this map an unfavorable pick for both of them. In Boombox's case, his effectiveness drops significantly on large open maps, especially in a mode like Annihilate, where players aren't incentivized to group up around a single point. With both enemies and allies more spread out across the map, not only is his AoE damage potential severely diminished, but his support capabilities are also hindered. Subspace's worst map is Annihilate in Rocket Arena. Rocket Arena features numerous entrances, creating an environment that works directly against Subspace's strengths. As a fighter who thrives in tighter spaces with clear choke points, Subspace relies on more compacted areas to maximize his AoE damage and utility, something this map is often unable to offer in Annihilate. Opponents can easily sidestep his mines or finisher, severely limiting his effectiveness in zoning opponents. Vinestaff's worst map is Annihilate on Banland. Vinestaff was another tricky case. As a support who relies heavily on area healing, she performs best when staying close to her team, so I initially thought that maybe she might not have a definitive worst map. And in a sense, an argument could be made that she technically doesn't. Well, Banland features an elevated ramp where sometimes backliners like to hold. Although it allows for great support, it offers little protection. Melee fighters can easily flank them due to the map's layout, and ranged fighters are given clear line of sight to attack from afar. Vinestaff especially suffers from this issue with her lack of mobility, making her an easy and prime target. Coil's worst map is unclear. Listen, as someone who's still trying to learn him, I can't really confidently make a decision on what his worst map is without it feeling wrong. I originally wanted to make an argument that he might generally struggle more on larger open maps, but his high mobility can allow him to quickly close in on gaps between opponents, so I didn't really feel like it'd make much sense. Much like Scythe, Coil's versatility thanks to his multiple forms makes me believe he can adapt to just about any map. With that said, Coil is arguably one of the most demanding fighters to learn and master, and making effective use of his full kit takes time and precision, so if any experienced Coil mains are watching this right now, let me know if there are, if any, maps that Coil struggles with and could be considered to be his worst map. And that's every fighter's worst map. What do you think? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya!